What's up guys, Mitch from Shock Therapy. Today we're going to show you how to install the brand new tie rod kit for the Polaris RZR Pro R and Polaris RZR Turbo R. Before we jump into the installation, we just wanted to go over a couple of the key features that we have in our tie rod kit, starting with the outer joint. This is a rebuildable custom outer joint that uses a 3/4 uniball. This also helps with the angles that we're trying to achieve throughout the cycle of this car. These components are all made of 4140 chromoly. They are heat treated to 50 Rockwell, and they're also nickel plated to prevent rust and corrosion down the road. So on top of our outer joint that we have here, we also have our inner clevis, which is designed by us. This is a patented piece as well. This comes with customized hardware. This helps connect it to the rack, prevents it from moving side to side. This also helps eliminate bump steer, and it also corrects a lot of the geometry that is in these cars. So we're going to utilize that. On top of that, we have our pin kit. This is very similar to all of our other BSD style kits. Comes with different size spacers, allows you to move this pin up or down inside the spindle. Again, helping to correct any sort of bump steer that we have in these cars. Another thing that's really cool with our kit is our tie rods are left and right hand thread. This makes the adjustments on the car very simple. You do not have to remove anything to set your toe when the installation is complete. Just another nice part about this kit here. In addition to the tie rods, we also have a 5/8 rod end that is going to be on the rack side that is going to connect to the tie rod and connect to the clevis. With this clevis, these custom bolts that we have, the one that is going to go to the rack, there is a torque spec of this bolt of 75 foot-pounds. The one bolt that holds the rod end into the clevis, this bolt is going to be torqued at 60 foot-pounds. And then our bolt that goes on top of the pin that this outer joint connects to, this bolt's going to get torqued to 22 foot-pounds. Another part of our tie rod kit is going to be the step bit. This is a 7/8 step bit. Something to keep in mind with early purchases of our tie rod kit, this may not come in the kit right away. You will have to outsource this either from Home Depot or a hardware store to help drill out the spindle on the car to a 7/8 hole to allow the pin to fit in there properly. And finally, with our tie rod kit, this outer joint, this pin kit, and this clevis kit can be bought separately to be added to other kits to help correct geometry and help fix the bump steer issues. That's the tie rod kit, so let's jump on into the installation and let's knock it out. All right guys, so with all the factory tie rod stuff removed from the car, the first step that we're gonna do is actually drill out the spindle to the 7/8 so that the pin can fit in there. A couple important things to note with this: when you do drill this, you wanna make sure that you are going as straight as possible. You don't wanna be moving around, you don't wanna oblong the hole, you wanna make that as perfect as possible. So we'll drill that out and then we'll go to the next step. All right, with the spindle drilled out, we're gonna go ahead and install the pin into the spindle here. A couple things to note when doing this: you wanna make sure that the pin slides in nice and good and freely, and it's not getting stuck or anything like that. If it does end up being tight, you can take that step bit drill and re-drill it out until the pin fits nicely. Another thing that you guys can do too is add a little bit of anti-seize to the inside of this. This is gonna help not get stuck in there. Go ahead and add that. Another thing to note with these spacers, we have noticed with the cars that we have cycled here, that the pin being all the way down is gonna be the best spot to start. Now, we do recommend that you guys cycle this to kind of see what you have in the car for bump steer, but starting all the way down is gonna be a good starting point to get you guys as close as possible. We'll install the pin. And then the spacers are gonna go on the bottom here. I like to put the smallest spacer, or the thinnest spacer, against the bottom side of the spindle. So that way the thicker one is gonna be against the nut here. Tighten that up there, just finger tight for right now. A cool thing about the pin is on the bottom, it does have a 1/4" Allen hole, so you can hold the pin while you tighten this nut down. This nut is gonna be 1 1/4" wrenched. You can hold it with the 1/4" and then tighten it down. Make sure that this all pinches together really nice. And we'll move on to the next step. Go ahead and tighten this up. All right, so once you have the pin installed into the spindle, we're gonna go ahead and install the clevis onto the rack gear here. A couple things to note before you install this clevis. On the rack gear, there's gonna be some red Loctite in there from the factory tie rod. You're gonna wanna make sure that you clean that out really good, make sure that there's no Loctite in there. It's gonna make this bolt going into the rack gear very difficult. So the cleaner that is, the better. You can do that by a bottom out tap, or you can get in there with a pick and some brake clean and clean it out really good. Once it's cleaned out, the way that this clevis is gonna go onto the rack is the threaded side of it. You're gonna wanna have that facing towards the firewall, and the bolt is gonna slide through here. That's gonna give you access to tighten everything down from the front side, gives you more clearance versus the back side. Just so make sure you're doing that. When this bolt goes in, make sure that we red Loctite that, and then this bolt gets torqued to 75 foot-pounds. So we'll go ahead and do that now. All right, so we're gonna use a tap to clean out the threads there. If you guys do use a tap, this is an M16 by 1.5 bottom out tap. Just make sure that you can get all the way to the bottom of the rack gear here, get all that stuff cleaned out. Okay, with that tapped, make sure you spray something in there, get all the rest of the stuff out of there, and then we'll go ahead and install the clevis. All right, we'll go ahead and spray this out. Make sure you watch yourself when you do that. So now we'll go ahead and install the clevis here. Another thing to point out is this recessed part of the clevis is actually gonna fit perfectly on the rack gear. So before this gets fully tightened down, just make sure that it is orientated the correct way. This is gonna help, again, prevent this clevis from spinning. Allows the tie rod to cycle the way that it needs to, and you're not gonna have any issues. Tight. Make sure our threads are on the back side here. Make sure the clevis is seated properly. Once it is, we'll go ahead and torque that to 75 foot-pounds. So before we torque this down, I want to point out one thing, a little pro tip for you. On the rack gear, you do have two flat sides. That is the perfect size for a 15/16 wrench. What you're going to want to do is hold the rack gear while you torque this. You don't want to just torque the clevis. That puts a lot of stress on the rack gear and the pinion. This is gonna kind of help prevent all that stuff while you tighten it. All right, with our clevis tightened, torqued, good to go, we're gonna install the rod end into the clevis. You do have two little spacers that come in the kit. Make sure those go on there first. And then the bolt that goes through the clevis to the rod end. You can put some anti-seize on this. You're also going to red Loctite this as well. And then this bolt is going to get torqued to 60 foot-pounds. Okay, once it's finger tight or hand tight, go ahead and torque it. All right, so once we have the rod end installed into the clevis, we're gonna install the tie rod onto the rod end. Again, the rod end can get a little bit of anti-seize on there just to make adjusting everything easier. Go ahead and thread that on. This is left-hand thread on this side, so make sure you guys are doing that. When you install this, you want to make sure it bottoms all the way out. You want to make sure the nut is as far down as it can go. That will help you when you are adjusting toe later on. Okay, once we get that, we're going to install the factory boot that came off of the factory tie rods. When you guys pull the boot off the factory ones, the factory tie rods have a jam nut in the middle of them. You basically loosen that, that'll separate the two pieces and allow you to pull off the factory boot. When you go to put the factory boot onto the new tie rod, you can spray some WD-40 in here. It helps it slide onto the tie rod a lot easier. We'll go ahead and do that now, and then once that's done, we'll install the outer joint and we'll move on from there. Doesn't take a lot of that, just a little spray. It'll help this boot slide on really nice. Don't cover up the joint yet, or the clevis yet. We're gonna put the boot about middle of the tie rod. Once we adjust toe and we're happy, then we'll install that later on. But once we got that, we'll go ahead and grab our outer joint here. Again, this is gonna be good to use some anti-seize on this guy here as well. Do that. And then this is right hand thread, so this will thread on normally. Again, make sure that this bottoms out as well. And then once that's on there, we can go ahead and install it onto the pin. You might have to move the uniball just a little bit to get it all lined up with the pin, so we can do that now. Once you get it lined up, go ahead and tap it on, and then we'll install the top cap and the 5/16 screw here. This bolt is also going to get red Loctite here. This is a 8mm or 5/16 12 point. This bolt's going to get torqued to 22 foot-pounds. Okay. Once that is installed, this side is complete. We'll move on to the next side. Once that's done, we'll set our toe and make sure everything is aligned good. We're good to go. All the whisper. There we go. All right guys, so once you get both sides installed, before you put the tires on, we're actually going to adjust the tie rods to where it's not so far towed out. We're gonna tow both sides in equally. Then we'll put the tires on, we'll settle it, and then we'll measure our toe and adjust our toe from there. This is just gonna kind of help the process of setting it and then settling the car once everything's back on. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this out a couple of turns. You can kind of see the hub and everything starting to come straight. We'll get it pretty close, and then we'll go to the other side. We'll do the same thing, and then we'll put tires on. All right, once we got both tires on, we'll pull the jack stands, lower it back to the ground. We're gonna drive it back and forth. We'll settle everything, and then we'll start measuring and checking our toe. Always remember when you guys take wheels and tires off to retorque your lug nuts to the manufacturer of the wheels specifications. All right. Don't have to do a whole lot, just drive it back and forth, make sure everything settles nicely. All right, once you guys settle the suspension, everything's good there, we're gonna go ahead and measure our first initial toe setting. The way you do this is from the inside of the front tire. It does help to have somebody help you. To the opposite side, we are 53.25. We're gonna take that same measurement on the back side of the tire. We are 53.5. So we're a 1/4 inch toed in right now, which is what we're looking for, anywhere from an 1/8 to a 1/4 toed in. If your guys' measurement is not there for your first starting point, you're gonna adjust the tie rod to move the tire in or out. And then it's a good idea to go drive it after that. Make sure the steering wheel is straight, make sure the car drives straight. If all is good there, we're now gonna go ahead and tighten down the jam nuts on both sides of the tie rods. All right, we'll go ahead and tighten the tie rods. When you do this, make sure you use blue Loctite on the tie rods. The jam nut doesn't come loose. Make sure you do it on both sides, the inner and the outer. And then when you guys go to tighten this, make sure that you tighten evenly on both sides so the tie rod doesn't move. It's okay if it pivots back, you just don't want to adjust the tie rod when you're doing this. Okay. And then if it did pivot, I like to move it back to its center spot here. And then we'll install the boot. All right, we'll go ahead and install the boot. Once the boot's on the rack, we'll install a zip tie on that side, make sure it's secure. Make sure we cut off the end of that one. And then we'll repeat those steps on the other side. With both tie rods locked down and the boots reinstalled, your installation is complete. That's pretty decent.
One take.
Not bad. Yep. He just said that, didn't he? That was pretty good. In addition, nope, the final part, the final piece, the final part. On top of that, we also have everything else. This screw is also going to get red Loctite. This screw, it's not a screw, it's a bolt, dummy. These custom bolts that I just paused way too long there, huh? Oh, damn it broke. This is also heat treated and, nope. Hello, Jesus. Hello?